Brown pumping off adrenaline. I'm way too in my element. I know there's people better than, but right now who is better than? A man that's working hard as shit, trying to find a pot to piss.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Extreme Lifestyle Living Podcast. Now, this is strictly an audio video, but I am excited to share. We are officially back in the Airbnb that we first came in when we arrived to Tulum, and it just gets me fired up. This one is such a beautiful spot. Not that the other one wasn't beautiful. As you know, I've been kind of giving you guys a personal side tangent and journey as to the Airbnbs we've been staying at, but we're traveling a lot, seeing a lot of different areas in Tulum, and we just decided to go back to our home base for when we first got here because it's absolutely beautiful. It really is, and I'm just looking around at the scenery. I'm just so happy to be here. Super fucking happy to be here and just grateful, honestly. We're going to stay here next month as well. Then we're home for Christmas, and then we're going to come back in the new year as well. And, if all goes well, we'll be back in this exact same unit. But nonetheless, let's jump into today's episode, which is the topic is doubling down on your consistency. And the reason why I want to talk about this is because, there's like kind of three easy avenues of success. Number one, or three steps, I should say. Step one is like, formulating a plan and realizing you need a plan, and wanting change. In order to get somewhere you haven't been before, you got to admit to yourself you need to change. You got to admit to yourself you don't know how to get there, and you got to admit to yourself that you need a game plan. So number one, when you're trying to change your life, that very first initial step is embracing your insecurities, embracing your traumas, embracing who you are as a person, and really kind of trying to understand like who you are within that change in itself. And, I think a big thing that we all kind of struggle with is, that's the hardest step, is accepting where we are right now is not where we want to be. Accepting who we are right now isn't who we need to become for the journey that we want to go towards. And, then eventually we lead into step two, which is, you formulate a game plan, you start showing up for your game plan, and you start trying to create the life you deserve. Let's say on three different avenues when you have a game plan. It's usually a physical game plan to feel better physically in the mirror, more confidence. Usually it's an interpersonal relationship with yourself, making sure you have more confidence and self-esteem to make sure that you can navigate your emotions, your anxieties and depressions a little bit better. Self-esteem, making sure you can show up in different rooms better. And, again, when step one, when you realize you're not who you want to become in this life, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually, there becomes that other avenue as well of really needing to, like I said, get that game plan of becoming that person you want to become. So then step two, when you start to indulge in that person and, create more, like, not say create, but bridge those gaps as to your insecurities and be more confident, bridge those gaps in your physical issues that you're not really confident with, and, working out to get better and control over that, especially when it comes to finances in your career. And, let's say who you are as a person. If you're angry all the time, you're depressed all the time, you have anxiety all the time, you start actively working towards that person, which is step two, being part of the game plan and really trying to create things to fruition. And if you guys have been here for a while, I kind of talk about that a lot and a lot more in-depth and more of an in-depth avenue. Like I said, at the beginning when I wanted to start this life and, move to Tulum and have my business and, me and Emma have this freedom, I started off with a plan. I started off with embracing my emotions, my depressions, my depression, my anxiety, my traumas, and really trying to formulate a plan as to who I was within the life that I already had. And then admitting to myself I didn't want to be that person. And then it was 2-3 years of showing up consistently every day, every week, every month of just trying to change, which is step number two, right? You're in that change. You're weathering the storm. You're showing up. You're creating change, and you really have no idea what you're doing. You don't know if anything's going to work out. Let's say from a simplicity sake, you're tracking your macros, you're showing up in the gym, but you have yet to see the success you want physically, emotionally. In that regard, you're doing a lot of these things with the hopes that you're going to become a better version of yourself. You're doing a lot of these things with the hopes that you're going to gain that physical version of yourself that you seek, that confident version of from a physical side in the mirror. Same with your anxiety, same with your depression. Like, let's say you're going through trauma, you're figuring out your mental health, you're like, things that you've been through and, why you feel certain ways. Like, it doesn't just change with a snap of a finger as soon as you figure out what it is. Like, especially with anxiety and self-esteem issues, like, you're not just confident overnight, So step two, after you have the game plan, is showing up and really trying to create that change. Step number three, from a simplicity sake, is, you start to see the change. You start to feel better physically in the mirror. You start to see some results. You have more systemized routines with your nutrition and gain a little bit of confidence. Let's say with your career or your education, you got more, let's say you progress further. You're not just year one in your program or year two in your program. You're halfway through it, weathering the storm. And same with your physical goals, right? You're at the halfway point. And then that's where you start to materialize things in your life. Like, another simplicity sake, from a boundary perspective as a human, when you decide to go to the gym for the first time and, protect your energy and space in that regard, there comes to a point where you start to gain people around you that are doing the same thing as you, that respect you for what you're doing. And then there's also a part where you have to deny a lot of people because they don't respect what you're doing. They don't respect the hustle. And they just truthfully just don't care about it for themselves, which is a whole other conversation, which is okay. It doesn't mean you're less than or better than nonetheless. It just means you're outgrowing certain people, outgrowing old versions of yourself. So to kind of reiterate it, to kind of give you that bird's eye view before I get into the topic is, step one is like embracing who you want to become, realizing you're not who you want to become, and trying to get a game plan. Step two is actually showing up for that game plan, trying to create change and trying to create, all the levels of life that you want. And step three is like, then navigating your life with some of this change and trying to figure out like this new version of yourself. And then to be honest, you repeat those three processes because there's a quote, new levels bring on new devils. So as you get to new levels and new heights in your life, there's going to be parts of you that need to, again, go back that you're not happy with the version that you've became. You're a lot happier than you used to be, but there's still versions of yourself that you need to get rid of, especially from a boundary standpoint, especially when you like get confidence, you're going to realize that deep rooted insecurities that you have from a self-esteem issues, from confidence issues, and really like your boundaries as to how you protect yourself and protect the people around you. Which leads me to the topic, which is doubling down on your consistency. Because a lot of you guys that listen to this podcast either work with me or have worked with me. We have conversations online. And the biggest thing is like, a lot of you guys are where you prayed to be. A lot of you guys have progressed in the gym. A lot of you guys have progressed mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Where you are now is light years ahead of where you used to be. You have way less depression. You're a lot more abundant and a lot more fulfilled in life. You have way less anxiety because you're a lot more fulfilled with life and excited as to what's going on. You're in way better physical shape. Yeah, you may not be where you want to be 100%, but you are so much closer to the end goal than you were at the starting point. And that's the biggest thing where you almost get lost. It's like almost like, how do I continue this journey? And one of my, I had a really good conversation with somebody that I know that, when I first met him, he was like doing well. He had his own business. He was in relatively good shape, but he wasn't happy with where he was at. He had a game plan. He was embracing his insecurities. He was showing up as himself, but he got lost in the translation of really weathering the storm of that change. And to give you a perspective, we all been through science class growing up in school, and they talk about like, the eye of the storm. The hurricane comes through, there's the eye of the storm where there's a lot of calm, a lot of peace. So, step one and step two is really weathering the first part of the storm. Your emotions are heightened, you're insecure, you're stressed out a little bit because you're trying to formulate this change. And then when you get the game plan, you start showing up for the game plan, you start seeing some change and start feeling better about yourself, you get into the eye of the storm. But then again, when you're in the eye of the storm, you're feeling really confident about your life, you're feeling good, but then there's still a little bit of an asterisk, if you will, of like, well, I still want this. I still want to be better in the gym this way. I still want to be better emotionally this way. I still want to be better financially this way. And I still want to have less anxiety or less depression and respect my boundaries this way. So then you go back to step one, formulate another game plan, and then it's like, how do I continue going forward? And the only way to go forward is to weather the other part of the storm and get through the rest of the hurricane and get to the other end of your goals. And that's just part of the journey, which is why I'm saying doubling down on your consistency is the only way to continue that momentum, to continue that growth and continue to shine as bright as you can. Because the harsh reality of changing your life, it's not hard. It's very simple. You embrace who you are and admit that you're not who you want to become, or you're not who you want to become yet. You look in the mirror, you say, I'm not happy with how I look. You look at your friend group, you look at your boundaries, you admit your anxieties to yourself and your traumas and how much weight of the world you're carrying, and then you formulate a game plan to show up. It's simple. The difficult part is staying consistent with it and embracing it and assuming that it's a transactional process, that when you get to the eye of the storm for the first time and feel a little bit of peace, feel a little bit of like fulfillment from your guys' work, that it's like, well, how do I, this is it. I thought I'd feel a lot better. And a prime example I share a lot is, for me and Emma, it was like, again, not the financial freedom, it was the freedom within our life, not having to listen to anyone else about like going to work and, like everyone knows what it's like. You wake up, you have anxiety, you have depression, you're struggling mentally, and you have to call work and, almost use a sick day and almost be ridiculed for using a sick day because you mentally don't feel good. And how do you talk to somebody about that in a world where most people don't understand it? So it's like the freedom was our biggest avenue of what we were chasing. And I'll be honest, when I got my first year of freedom, and it was the hardest year of my life because I was just met with all of the expectations I thought was going to happen, which is why I'm bringing up the transactional side of things. It's not of point A plus point B equals point C. You don't just show up, change your life, and it's that easy. It is to a degree on paper, but there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of trauma, there's a lot of expectations, a lot of self-disappointment. And, I've talked about your expectations in terms of your realities, and, that's the killer of all joy, honestly, is, when your expectations don't meet your reality. And 9 times out of 10, it's because our expectations are ridiculously high, and we just expect so much out of ourselves, which is a great thing. It's just something we need to manage. But again, the game plan doesn't change. If you want to get in better shape, The hardest part is starting. So to continue getting in best shape, in the best shape of your life, is to do the same shit you've been doing. It's just take it to the next level. And when it comes to the gym, it's like, there was a point in your life where you weren't even consistent going all the time. So then it's like the consistency in the gym never changes. It's just your education, your experience, and your commitment to the gym and your intentions behind it changes. Same thing if you want to have a more of a financial abundant future, like, showing up and getting education, working on self-development, challenging people around you, and taking courses, and like I said, getting education and doing these mentor programs and putting yourself in a position to try to make more money. It doesn't change. You just show up in the arena and continue to do it. It's just your intention around it becomes higher. Your efforts become higher. Everything just gets a little bit more aligned with who you are as a person, which is the other side of that storm I'm talking about. Same with boundaries. It's very easy, let's say, simplicity's sake, let's say you're drinking all the time, doing drugs, and you're not really happy, you have a lot of anxiety, you're carrying things from the past, a little bit depressed. All you got to do is create a boundary, create a day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month routine so you can stay out of that position. But then again, that's only on paper. It's not transactional. Just say, hey, I'm happy now, I'm fulfilled, I have confidence, and it goes away. There's going to be days you're stressed out. There's going to be days that stuff kind of comes up, and like you get stressed out. You're going to have depression symptoms. You're going to have anxiety. You're going to have this turmoil you still got to get through. But it's all about the consistency around the day-to-day habits. And not really changing the game plan per se, but making the intention and the effort around that game plan in itself that much better for yourself. And the biggest thing that I can say, for my standpoint, doing this for about 3 to 5 years now, I never really know how long I've been doing it. I feel like I've been doing it for like 8 years, but it's only been COVID. It's 2025. I've only been doing this full time for like 2.5 years now. I actually looked back on the numbers, and I actually thought I was doing it for 3.5, 4 years, but I've been doing this full time for 2.5 years. It's not that long. So my expectations were I was supposed to be a lot further. And then I got into my head thinking I need to do something different and change things up. And I didn't need to change anything. I needed to double down on the consistency around all of these areas of my life. If you want to be more fulfilled, practice your faith more. If you want to be more fulfilled and happy and have more joy in your life, then you got to continue to show up for yourself to challenge what that looks like for your life. And it's the same as the beginning. You know what I mean? If you want to get in better shape, it's the same thing in the beginning. You got to be consistent. You got to continue to track your macros. You got to be consistent in tracking your food and all of these different things. And that's the biggest thing I want you guys to take out of this episode, just short, sweet, impactful, is, to get to the other side of the storm, to let the hurricane of, your change of your life to completely surpass you and you hit that next level of life you want to. It's just being consistent on the same shit you have been doing. Except the second part of the storm, getting from the eye of the storm through the second leg of the storm to get rid of it entirely, is just being incredibly in tune with yourself as to exactly what that looks like and doing it even when it's hard. That's why a lot of people fall off their fitness goals, is because they think it's a transactional process. They think they can show up, get in the best shape of their life, and then they're done. There's so many people that have joined my program and Emma's program that, I want to lose 10 to 15 pounds. They lose it and then they're done. It's like, no. It's like now the next stage is keeping that off. The next stage is being able to eat your cake and be able to keep that off. And there's so many other levels that can go into it. But, doubling down on your consistency is probably the best thing that you guys can do. And it's simple, because again, if you guys have been doing this for a year, 2 years, 3 years, you don't have to fucking change a thing. You just got to do the same shit you've been doing every single motherfucking day. It's just you got to learn who you are more throughout that process and be more proud of that person. And that's pretty much it. So other than that, I hope you guys got some takeaways from this short and sweet episode. It's something that I've been kind of holding close to my vest lately, just being super consistent as to what I've been doing. And at the end of the day, if you've been doing this for a while, you don't have to fucking change anything. It's super, super simple. The difficult part is just realizing who you are throughout everything that you're fucking doing. So I appreciate you guys all. Thanks for tuning in as per usual, and keep showing up, leading from the motherfucking front and setting that goddamn fucking standard. Let's go.
I'm pumping off adrenaline. I'm way too in my element. I know there's people better than, but right now who is better than? A man that's working hard as shit, trying to find a pot to piss. Showing all the ups and downs, shit is filled with